I'm so happy you're here. Welcome to Chai Beauty, where I get to share my thoughts, my dreams, my aspirations, my visions for the future. And guess what? You get to be along for this journey because we are in this together. So when I got to chapter 2, I would say I felt overwhelmed. I got sad. I was very teary-eyed because when you take chapter 1 and you see this person in the book and they're telling them how they're out of control and they have lack of boundaries, you're like, okay, cool. And like I said last in my podcast, like really look at yourself and see where you're out of control. Well, chapter 2 was so overwhelming because for me, I didn't have a name for every boundary. Like I had a concept and I said, if somebody makes me feel like this, then I need to do X, Y, and Z. And I got that from therapy and just learning how to communicate, because I think one of the hardest things for me is learning how to communicate, because sometimes I know how it feels, but it's very hard to then try to soften your approach to someone to let them know what has happened internally to you. And so going through this chapter, it was just a lot of feelings. And then it was a lot in the handbook. And so I was like, how am I going to redo this? Because this is hard. Very hard. And then I got confused because my handbook and the actual book don't match. So where in the handbook, I'm still on chapter 1, but I've had to read chapter 2 in the work. No, sorry. In the book, I'm on chapter 2, and then in the work, but I'm still on 1. And I was like, geez Louise, what is happening? So we're on chapter 2. But if you're following along in the workbook, depending on what edition you get, you're potentially still on number 1. So that took me a couple of seconds to figure out, because the workbook goes with the 2017 edition, and I got the most recent boundary book because they revamped it again, and I didn't realize that. But also the workbook said it was revamped, so I thought they matched. Oopsie. So I guess my question to you in this first segment is, how did you feel about the book? What are you thinking? What are you contemplating? What gave you strong emotions? What was like, I already knew this, because you're smart and intelligent. So some of the stuff you're like, next, all right, tell me something new. And so when we get into the handbook, it talks about invisible property lines and responsibility. So what boundaries in the physical world do we deal with? And so a lot of good examples were like your fence, your gate, traffic lights, tell you stop, go, and whatever. I think the ones I deal with a lot is when you're working in settings and the boundary of how do you talk to somebody. If you are in a house where people are very blunt and they say what they say, and you just have to have, some people be like, you just have to have tougher skin and you just wash it off. But then if you have a house that isn't very communicative and they avoid problems, then someone wouldn't know how to face an issue. And so when I thought about that question, I was like, oh, what boundaries in the physical world do you deal with every day? I was just like, people, stoplights, fences, my apartment. But this is my house. It'll be really weird if my neighbor just walked over and banged on my door and came in and had a cup of tea. Like, can you please ask first? The second one is, what kind of boundary do you think needs to exist in the spiritual world? So this one was very interesting in the sense of, I did not think of a boundary as a fence where it has a gate where it comes in and out. I honestly, it talks about in the book like a wall, like you shouldn't have a wall, but I really did think like you had a wall. Like, actually, I'm not gonna lie, I thought about Omar, or is his name Omarion? Who knows? Omarion, where he's like, I got an icebox where my heart used to be. I thought about that. I was like, my heart is in an icebox, but it's in a box. Like, there's a lock and key, and I'm just not about to give everybody the passcode. Like, you just can't click and get in there. So that's how I took boundaries. I know in my head, and so to then for it to get deeper in this chapter, I was, oh, that makes sense. I can pivot that for my heart to be open and still guarded. It's more like a fence with a gate. I said, but I like top security, so my fence gonna have a keypad on it. You just can't let anybody come in. Like, we'll work on it. Like, we'll see if in the chapters I change, but that's where we are. What spiritual boundaries are important as? Why are spiritual boundaries as important as physical boundaries? I think at the end of the day, we as human beings all do not want to be hurt. Like, we are like, I want to love someone and I want to be loved, and I just don't want you to hurt me. I think further for me, I feel like not only do I not want to be hurt, I've learned what it's like to have peace, and I learned what it's like to give to somebody when my cup is full. Like, when I have abundance. And I don't give people permission. I don't give myself permission to in the past say, I do not hold the capacity to talk to you. I do not hold the capacity to say something to you. And because of that has allowed me not to give the better version of myself. And so that's why I believe spiritual boundaries are important as physical ones, because your soul is so beautiful. It's so complex. It's a little unique snowflake. You're made in God's image. So what you do for others, only you can do. But if you're coming at it in like this broken, empty state, like, you're not giving your best version. You're not giving the best advice that could really change somebody's life. And then you don't want to attract other broken souls, and then it's just a mess, and you get in these toxic relationships, and then you start airing your stuff on Facebook, and it just be a whole lot. So that's why I think spiritual boundaries are just as important as physical ones. And so the goal of the lesson is to help you define your tangible boundaries and to recognize them as a ever-present reality that you can increase your love and save your life. These boundaries are define your soul and help you guard and maintain. And they use Proverbs 4:23. And I think that was the most eye-opening part of this, was like, boundaries represent your soul. Like, who are you as a person? And I said, who am I as a person? And then the second part of this was me and not me. And I'll just have to read it verbatim. Boundaries divide us. They define what is me and what is not me. A boundary shows where you end and somebody else's begins. Leads to a sense of ownership. We deal with what is in our soul. And boundaries help us define what that is. The Bible tells us clearly what our parameters are and how to protect them. But often our family or other past relationships has confused us about our parameters. And so the question goes, is explain how knowing what you are to own and take responsibility for giving you freedom. And I was like, oh, that question, I just really didn't understand. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I think I know who I am. Um, but the second question was, what does pain result when you are not shown the parameters of your soul and not taught wrong parameters? And you're taught wrong parameters. And so when I thought about these two questions, I said, if I explain what my soul is Philippians 4:8. Love is just, um, love is kind, right? And then as I've grown, I turned to First Corinthians, which is love is patient, love is kind, love is not boast of wrongdoings. And then when I don't have parameters and I don't know how to love somebody, it's difficult because I'm not gonna lie. I remember somebody telling me or something I read that says like 85% of your brain is negative thoughts, right? So when I'm left to assume something, it's always negative. It's not that, like, even though I'm a very optimistic person, I think I'm more optimistic. I do have those negative things when I'm left by myself to think about what someone else is saying, doing, reacting. It's just very difficult. So in this season of learning, like, oh, if I'm, these boundaries are now, don't think of them as something separate from you. Think of it as who you are. Who am I? And so when I think about who I am, I think I'm an outgoing person, yet I come and I get my energy from having little quiet times where I look at the wall look at me, and nobody is depending on me. It's one of the reasons why I'm apprehensive about children, because I'm like, I really do need like them 3 minutes of nap time to like focus on me, like, and to have somebody constantly demand me. Like my smallest step was getting a dog, and even him, I'd just be looking at him. I'd be like, "Ooh, I gotta take you outside. Ooh, I gotta go buy you dog food." And so that was my small stuff of being like, okay, I may be apprehensive, or the word afraid, of somebody depending on me, but let's take this small step. Let me trust in God that God gave me this dog, and He will provide for me in this dog, and we will live abundantly in that sense. And eventually, that fear of dependence is like, it will move, because guess what? I've done it. Like, I've taken care of a dog for as long as he lives, Mr. Banks. The second thing was when it said defining your soul and the gate. I said, "Ooh, how have I let someone else define my soul? Like, how have I heard something and said and just taking that on? Like, somebody said something and I was like, yep, that's me. I'm good. That's what I do, whether it's good or bad. But never just sat there and judge the words that were given to me on a scale of saying, is that truly who I am? And if that's not, how do I change who I am so that I'm perceived this way? But also remembering that people have their own issues, and you can change as much as you want, and you're never good enough. And that's okay. You just have to take into account, like, this is how I want to be shown or seen in this light, and hopefully most people see me as this.